Every story has a beginning. The story of the modern world, of the device you're watching this on, of the networks that connect us, of the very fabric of the 21st century begins here. Not in a bustling metropolis, but in a quiet, sun-baked stretch of California farmland that was about to be given a new name, Silicon Valley. But this isn't a story about a place. It's a story about a rebellion. A story of betrayal and ambition, and a handful of brilliant, restless minds who were branded as traitors and ended up building the future. This is the story of the founding of Intel. Our story begins with a titan. William Shockley was a man who had touched the face of creation. As the co-inventor of the transistor at Bell Labs, he had replaced the fragile, power-hungry vacuum tube with a tiny sliver of semiconductor material, earning him a Nobel Prize and a place in the pantheon of science. In 1956, he decided to turn his genius into a business. He left the established scientific corridors of the East Coast and set up Shockley Semiconductor Laboratory in Mountain View, California, a small town nestled in the Santa Clara Valley. He had his pick of the nation's brightest minds. He was William Shockley, and young scientists flocked to his banner. Among them were Gordon Moore, a quiet, brilliant chemist from Caltech, and Robert Noyce, a charismatic, fast-talking physicist from MIT. They were part of a hand-picked group of young PhDs, most between the ages of 26 and 33, who believed they were about to build the future of electronics. They were right. They just wouldn't be building it with William Shockley. The man's scientific genius was matched only by his managerial incompetence. Shockley's lab quickly descended into a state of paranoia and dysfunction. He recorded all phone calls, believing his ideas were constantly at risk of being stolen. He demanded his brilliant researchers, men with doctorates, handle all the technical labor themselves, refusing to hire support staff. He was known for public firings, gathering the entire team to watch as he dismissed an unsuspecting employee without warning. But his most fateful decision was a technical one. After assembling this dream team to perfect the mass production of silicon transistors, Shockley abruptly changed course. He ordered a halt to the transistor project and commanded everyone to focus on a niche, complex device called a four-layer diode. The reasons were unknown, but the effect was clear. The most promising work at the lab was shelved, and its most brilliant minds were left frustrated and sidelined. Shockley's attempt to forge a perfectly controlled research dynasty was backfiring. He had gathered the sharpest minds in a generation, trapped them in an unbearable environment, and then taken away their most important work. He wasn't building a company. He was building a pressure cooker.
By May of 1957, the pressure became too much. A group of 7 scientists, led by Gordon Moore, went to Shockley's financial backer, Arnold Beckman, with an ultimatum: fire Shockley as a manager, or they would walk. Beckman, fearing for his investment, initially agreed to bring in a professional manager, but 2 months later, he changed his mind. Unwilling to destroy the career of a Nobel laureate, he told the researchers that Shockley would remain in charge with his full powers intact. It was a take-it-or-leave-it offer. They left it. 7 of them made their decision. The last to join was Robert Noyce. He had tried to mediate the conflict, to stand behind Shockley, but the situation was hopeless. At the last minute, he was persuaded to join the defectors. Shockley was incandescent with rage. He branded them the Traitorous 8, a slur that would echo through history, but not in the way he intended. The 8 had the talent, but they needed money. And they wanted to stay in California, far from the financial hub of Wall Street. Their search led to a young visionary investment banker named Arthur Rock. The idea of funding a group of people rather than an existing company with a product was unheard of. Rock was turned down by more than 30 firms. Finally, he found a willing investor in Sherman Fairchild, an inventor and founder of Fairchild Camera and Instrument. The deal they struck was a fateful compromise. Fairchild Camera would provide $1.5 million. In return, the parent company retained the right to buy the entire new venture, Fairchild Semiconductor, for a flat $3 million at any point in the next 8 years. The 8 got their lab, but they were once again employees, not owners. This single clause buried in the paperwork was a ticking time bomb. What Shockley called a betrayal, history would call a birth. This act of defiance shattered the 1950s corporate ethos of unwavering company loyalty, an act then considered ungentlemanly. The success of the Traitors created a new playbook. It legitimized the spin-off, turning what was once seen as disloyalty into a virtue, the relentless pursuit of innovation. It was the birth of a culture that would define Silicon Valley and set it apart from the more staid corporate world of Boston's Route 128.
Fairchild Semiconductor was an explosion of success. They took the silicon transistor technology Shockley had abandoned and perfected it, selling their first batch of 100 to IBM for $150 apiece. Led by Noyce, the team made a series of revolutionary breakthroughs. Gene Horney developed the planar process, a method for creating flat, reliable transistors. And in 1959, Robert Noyce had his eureka moment, the monolithic integrated circuit. He realized he could print an entire circuit, transistors, resistors, and all, on a single piece of silicon. It was the microchip. The company grew from just 12 employees to 12,000, with revenue soaring to $130 million a year. Noyce, as general manager, fostered a revolutionary new work culture. In direct opposition to Shockley's rigid hierarchy, Fairchild was casual and egalitarian. There were no reserved parking spaces, no executive dining rooms, no stuffy suits. This laid-back Californian style was designed to let brilliant ideas flourish, and it worked. But Fairchild was living in a gilded cage. The parent company, Fairchild Camera and Instrument, was an old-guard East Coast firm. They saw the semiconductor division not as an engine of innovation, but as a cash cow. Profits were siphoned away from California and diverted to less profitable ventures back east. The crucial investments in research and development, the lifeblood of the fast-moving semiconductor industry, were starved. The brilliant minds that Noyce had cultivated began to grow restless. The very culture of mobility that Fairchild was built on now turned against it. One by one, key employees left to start their own companies, spin-offs that became known as the Fairchildren. These companies would become legends in their own right. AMD, National Semiconductor, and the venture capital firms that would fund the next generation of giants, Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital. Fairchild had become the unwitting seedbed for the entire industrial complex of Silicon Valley, an incubator that was perfectly designed to create and then expel its greatest talent.
The end of the Fairchild era didn't happen in a boardroom. It happened on a lawn. One spring afternoon in 1968, Robert Noyce was mowing his front yard when his friend and colleague Gordon Moore stopped by. Moore, now Fairchild's head of R&D, had an idea. He believed the emerging technology of semiconductor memory could form the basis of a new company. Noyce, the general manager, was tired of fighting with the East Coast executives. The decision was made right there, among the manicured lawns of Los Altos. They went back to the man who had made it happen the first time, Arthur Rock. Noyce typed up a simple one-page business plan. Rock didn't need to see spreadsheets or 5-year projections. He knew Noyce and more. According to Rock, Noyce simply said, "We're going to leave. We need $2.5 million to get started." I said, "Fine, let's do it."
I was never so sure of an investment in my entire life. Rock raised the money in less than 2 days. But this time, the deal would be different. Rock had learned a powerful lesson from the Fairchild experience about the power of incentives. He designed a deal that was the polar opposite of the first one. Noyce and Lohr put up $250,000 each of their own money, and along with Rock, retained a massive ownership stake in the new venture. Their potential return was uncapped. The board structure gave them shared control with their investors. The brief 4-page memo Rock drafted for this deal would become the Magna Carta of venture capital, the foundational template for how tech startups would be funded for the next 50 years. Noyce and Moore knew they needed one more person. They needed an operator, a disciplined, ferocious manager who could turn their vision into a manufacturing reality. They turned to Andy Grove, Moore's brilliant deputy at Fairchild. Grove, a Hungarian refugee who had survived Nazi occupation and escaped Soviet repression, was a force of nature. He was the perfect complement to the other two. Thus, the Intel Trinity was formed. Noyce, the charismatic visionary and industry statesman, Moore, the quiet technologist and scientific prophet, and Grove, the relentless operational engine. Together, they incorporated their new venture on July 18, 1968.
The new company was initially called NM Electronics for Noyce and Moore. They quickly considered Moore Noyce, but rejected it after realizing it sounded too much like Moore Noise, a terrible name for an electronics company. They settled on a portmanteau of Integrated Electronics, Intel. Noyce thought it sounded sort of sexy. There was just one problem. A hotel chain called Intelco already existed. They bought the rights to the name for $15,000. Intel's stated mission was to conquer the computer memory market, replacing the bulky magnetic core memory of the day with fast, cheap semiconductor chips. And they succeeded spectacularly. Their 1103 DRAM chip, released in 1970, became the world's best-selling semiconductor device and effectively killed the core memory industry. But the invention that would truly define Intel and the world was an accident. It was a distraction born of constraint. In 1969, a Japanese calculator company called Busicom asked the small startup to design a complex set of 12 custom chips for a new printing calculator. Intel didn't have the manpower for such a complicated project. An Intel engineer named Ted Hoth proposed a brilliantly simple solution. Instead of 12 specialized chips, why not build a family of just 4? Including one single programmable general-purpose chip, a computer on a chip. Under the design leadership of Federico Fagan, the team created the Intel 4004. Busicom, having financed the project, owned the exclusive rights, but as the 4004 was being completed, the calculator market crashed and Busicom found itself in financial trouble. They asked Intel for a price cut. The Intel team saw a historic opportunity. Robert Noyce made a counteroffer that would change the world. Intel would refund Busicom's entire $60,000 investment. In exchange, Intel would get the rights to sell the 4004 to anyone for any purpose. Busicom, desperate for cash, agreed. The genius here was twofold. First was the serendipitous invention of the microprocessor to solve a practical problem, but the true masterstroke was recognizing what they had created. It wasn't just a calculator part, it was a universal engine. For a mere $60,000, Intel had just bought the keys to the digital kingdom.
Back in 1965, while still at Fairchild, Gordon Moore had made an observation. He noticed that the number of components on an integrated circuit was doubling roughly every year,
a trend he predicted would continue. This observation became known as Moore's Law. At Intel, Moore's Law became more than an observation. It became a mission statement, a self-fulfilling prophecy that set the relentless pace for the entire industry. The predictable, exponential increase in computing power and decrease in cost driven by Intel's microprocessors made the personal computer revolution possible. The Intel 8080 powered the Altair 8800, one of the first home computers. The Intel 8088 was the heart of the IBM PC, the machine that brought computing into the mainstream. On July 18, 1968, two men didn't just start a company. They lit a fuse. They made a pact with the exponential. They turned a defection into a dynasty and a prophecy into a reality. The legacy of Intel isn't just in the silicon. It's a testament to the power of dissatisfaction. It's a reminder that history is rarely shaped by those who are content, but by the rebels, the traitors, and the paranoid who believe the future is something you don't wait for. You build it. It leaves us with one lingering question. What golden cages are being abandoned today, and what impossible futures are they about to unleash? The story of Intel is filled with even more incredible twists, brilliant minds, and high-stakes decisions. If you want to dive deeper, I've linked some of the best books on the subject in the description and the first pinned comment below. Telling these stories is our passion. If you believe history is more than just dates and names, and you want to support immersive storytelling, please consider subscribing and hitting that like button. It helps us create more content just like this. Thank you for watching.